All right. So we have a very special guest today, the Honorable
Yes.
Stacey Abrams. So if you are not familiar with her, I'm assuming that you don't own a television or
Perhaps.
you don't have a cell phone or you don't listen to radio.
Or you
Yes.
or you might not have taken part in last election.
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe
Many
you did.
many people credit her with Joe Biden's victory because she was very intricate in delivering Georgia,
Ooh.
which is that the first time ever that that's happened, or the first time
It's-
in a lot of
I
years?
First
think
time in a long time.
40? Yeah, about 40
The
years.
first time in 40 years that Georgia went Democrat. But now she has aspirations of her own. She ran last time and lost by a very thin margin. So it's a neck and neck battle right now to become the governor of Georgia,
Hmm.
which is the most powerful position in the state.
Mhm.
And that will be the first time in a very long time, also. And I believe the first time ever that a black woman would be the governor of Georgia. I'm pretty sure that's never happened before. So this is a historical moment that we're in right now from a political side. This is a financial platform. So we have questions about the finance and about, the business side of things because it's important. And I think that we have a journalistic responsibility to talk to people that are in position of power or that could potentially be in very high positions of power. And especially a state like Georgia, where Atlanta, we just did Invest Fest, over 13,000 people. You actually gave a message that we played on the
Mhm.
big screen. Thank you for that. But Atlanta and Georgia is our second home and one of our biggest markets. So it's vitally important that we have this conversation. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's very rare that we have royalty here with us, and so
Yes.
we appreciate you in the
It's
Invest
truly
Fest.
honor.
My parents were talking to me about it after. They were like, "Oh my God, is she backstage? Can we see?" I'm like, "Mom, it's a video." She's like, "Oh my God, please." I'm like, "It's a video." But
Yes.
thank you again.
It
So
was my honor.
so we'll get into this conversation. I guess we can just do how we usually do. We all just ask questions.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have is a lot of times from the business side of things, right? So a lot of times people say that politicians don't understand business because they were career politicians and they stifle business and they hurt business. But you're actually an entrepreneur and you have a variety of different businesses. So what are some things that you've learned from entrepreneurship that you think has helped you or can potentially help you in running a very important state like Georgia in politics?
Well, the first business that I started wasn't technically considered a business. I wrote a novel when I was in law school. I had to sell it during my first year as an attorney. And that taught me about marketing, but also taught me about market research. This was at the beginning of Amazon. And I had to figure out a way to break through with a Black authored romance novel, which was really rare at the time to get Black women, basically for Black women to be published as romance novelists by big platforms. And so I needed to be the number one selling book that day. So I got all of the people I had ever met to buy from Amazon on the exact same day. And that catapulted me, and people started asking about my book. Now, it didn't last very long because some other book came out the next day. But that moment was thinking about how do you harness, if you don't have the platforms people are used to, how do you use the networks that you do have to develop your marketing approach? The second business I started was a consulting firm. And that was really about how do you chase business? How do you get people to hire you when what you're selling is your mind? And different from a commodities company where you're able to sell while you sleep, you've got to be awake for consulting to work. And so that's really about how do you offer a differentiated product that people understand. And then my latest company was a company called Now Account. I'm no longer day to day with it, but that's a financial services company because I know that one of the impediments I faced in another business was access to capital. And that's something that small businesses face all the time. And in particularly in Georgia, because we lost more banks than any other state during the Great Recession, and Black owned businesses have the least amount of access because we lost so many banks. Access to capital is the difference between success and failure, because it's not just about operating capital, it's being able to even know where to go and having someone trust that it's worth risking. When you bring that to the governor's office, it's about making sure we're creating programs that actually address these challenges. How do we market our small businesses? We do a great job of championing big companies, but how do we market our small businesses? Two, how do we solve the challenges of those small businesses that are completely and totally driven by their owner, by their entrepreneur? How do you bolster them and make sure they can do what they need? And then 3, how do we make certain that we're underwriting the financial risk so that those small businesses get the capital they need to succeed?
Yeah, I love that you keep talking about small businesses, because that's one of the reasons we love Georgia and we love Atlanta. When we go there, we see businesses and we see people that look like us owning businesses, and we see men and we see tons of women and entrepreneurs creating their own businesses. And so you also brought up programs. Can you talk to us about the Georgia Commercial Investment Program? Because this is one of those things, like, how do we get capital? Where are we getting it from? How do we deploy? Can you talk to us about that?
So there are 2 pieces to what I want to do. One is I want to expand the purchasing power of the state. There was a report just yesterday on a local television station about the fact that in Georgia, just this past year, more than $7 billion in contracts were let. Less than 7% went to minority-owned and women-owned firms. And you always have to be suspicious of that number because it's different. It's different to be a person of color than it is to be a woman. And having been both my entire life, I understand the different treatment that exists. But even if you combine both of those, it's only 7.7% of the contracting that we know of. People of color are 48% of the state. To only have 7% of the contracts is absurd. And so one thing the governor can do without legislation is use Georgia's purchasing power to support small businesses by directing the Department of Administrative Services to establish and monitor targets to make certain that all the state agencies are actually purchasing intentionally from minority-owned small businesses, and also providing the technical assistance so those small businesses can actually secure and fulfill those state contracts. But the other part of that is what I call my my small business capital investment fund, which is $10 million that would then allow those same small businesses to do, if they have to go and buy initial equipment to take the contract on, let's give you the money and underwrite your loan to get that contract. Because if you get that contract, $50,000 should not stop you from making $5 million. But for a lot of small businesses, it's the point of entry that's so expensive. In contrast, the current governor is going to establish a study to look at whether or not this is a problem. You don't have to study Georgia to understand that it is a problem when 48% of your population only gets 7% of your business. And that's the conversation that's happened every year for the last 20 years. Governor after governor says, well, we'll talk about it. We'll study it. They won't move legislation to solve it. Well, as governor, you solve the problem because I don't need legislation. I can do it directly. And there was something you said at the opening. I not only will be the first Black governor of Georgia, I'll be the first Black woman governor in American history.
Wow.
And so I'm bringing to this conversation not only the skills, but a very strong sense of urgency around solving this problem, because if we don't tackle it, it will be 100 years, not 10, not 20, 100 years before we close the gap between minority-owned businesses and non-minority firms in the state of Georgia.